welcome to the reading room. This is the playlist where I review what I read in the last month, and I will do my best to keep these reviews spoiler-free. And as I say in all my reviews, these are solely about the books, not about the authors or them as people. So let's go ahead and dive in and talk about the books that I read in June. So first up, we have A Death at the Party by Amy Stuart, and this is a book from the Book Drop, their Books for Coffee, aka their thriller book subscription. And I have to say, there were few thrills to be had with this. But before we get into it, let's see what the book promised that it was going to be about. Nadine Walsh's summer garden party is in full swing. The neighbors all have cocktails, the catered food is exquisite, everything's going according to plan. But Nadine, devoted wife, loving mother, and doting daughter, finds herself standing over a dead body in her basement, while her guests clink glasses upstairs. What happened? How did it come to this? Rewind to that morning when Nadine is in her kitchen making last-minute preparations before she welcomes more than 100 guests to her home to celebrate her mother's birthday. But her husband is of little help to her, her 2 grown children are consumed with their own concerns, and only her mother knows that today isn't just a birthday party. It marks another anniversary as well. Still, Nadine will focus just on tonight. Everyone deserves a celebration after the year they've had. A chance for fun, a chance to forget. But it's hard to forget when Nadine's head is swirling with secrets, haunting memories, and concerns about what might happen when her guests unite. So first up, I don't like Nadine. I don't know if she was meant to be an unreliable narrator or what, but she is extremely unhinged, and for seemingly no apparent reason. I just could not stand her by the end. And speaking of the end, this book has one of the most abrupt endings I've ever read. It's like climax, and 2 pages later, we're closing the story. What? And to me, the ending didn't really finish the story. I have so many questions. I have so many unanswered questions about the characters that I will have to just discuss in a spoilery review in the future, because WTF book, really, what the hell? I think this book was severely disjointed, and things kind of just happened because they needed to, like certain characters being around when they need to be, certain reveals at just the right time for a novel, but they're not very realistically set up, and even certain things just happening in the plot to kickstart the story. It was convenient, but also unrealistic and a tad annoying. A lot of this starts because of Nadine falling and breaking her hip, and it's written like she caught her son doing something, and that's why she fell, and somehow that sparked her interest in remembering more about Colleen, but no. The hip break could have been completely cut out, as it means nothing and adds nothing besides being page filler for Nadine to worry about throughout the story. On the positive side, the book is a relatively fast read, and the whole book pretty much spans one day with a few flashbacks here and there. Some of the reveals were also interesting, to say the least, but they also didn't really feel earned. But I will take what I can get from this book, and I also do just have to say, the cover of this is gorgeous. The inside just does not match the cover. All in, I would probably rate this 1.5 to 2 stars, as it was slow, kind of boring. Why is this classified as a thriller again? And that ending really pissed me off. It is called A Death at the Party, and the death only takes probably 8% of the book. It didn't make much sense to me. I will say that I'm probably going to give Stuart another try, as she is a good writer, but this plot needed some serious work. I will be devoting a wine club episode to just this book, because that's how mad I was when I closed it, or when I really just wanted to throw it against the wall. So next up we have Breaking All the Rules by Amy Andrews. So unfortunately, June is just not going well for me. I did not like this. But knowing what I know now, that this is a somewhat spicy romance, I do have to take some of the blame, because that's not my typical genre. But let's see what the book promised before I talk about what I thought of it. Beatrice Archer has always done everything she's supposed to. worked her ass off, ignored her non-existent personal life, and kept her mouth shut. Now she's over it. The rat race, respectability, the underwire bras. She's taking her life back, starting with moving to nowhere, Colorado, to live life on her own terms. Now B gives exactly 0 forks. Beer for breakfast, sugar for everything else. Baggy sweats and soft cotton undies for the win. Then a much younger and delightfully attractive cop is called to deal with her flagrant disregard for appropriate clothing outside the local diner. Some folks just don't appreciate bunny slippers. And B realizes there's something missing from her little decathlon of decadence. And he might be the guy to help her out. When it comes to breaking rules, Officer Austin Cooper is surprisingly eager to assist. He's charming, a little bit cowboy, and a whole lot sexy. But B's about to discover that breaking the rules has consequences, and all the cherry pies in Colorado can't save her from what's coming. So I'm going to say that I have a toothache after reading this book. It is so sugary and fluffy and cheesy, which is not a good combo, at least not for me. Even some of the characters felt like they popped out of a Disney for adults TV show or some sort. They're just all so wholesome and perfect and content. And I recognize that this is definitely a me problem. I don't like Hallmark or Lifetime Christmas movies as they're just too sweet for my taste. So if you do gravitate towards that and you're not a soulless Grinch like me, you might really like this. But I repeat, I did not. I was also kind of unsure about the setting of this. They make sure you know that they're in eastern Colorado, but why would you pick the most boring part of our state as someone who has lived here for 13 years? Like, you could have picked the West or a mountain town, but no, you pick the part that is indistinguishable from Kansas or Nebraska? That's a choice. Do not, I repeat, do not turn reading this into a drinking game. If you were to take a drink every time something is italicized that does not need to be italicized, you will have taken 32 sips by page 10. It drove me bonkers, absolutely bonkers. I was almost seeing red by the time this book was ending with how many italicized words I read. And it wasn't even just like it was B's internal thoughts, which are typically italicized to set it apart from the book. Nope, it's just everything is called attention to when it doesn't need to be. I know I sound psychotic being so annoyed by something so small, but I don't care. It drove me up the wall. I get that it's a stylistic choice, but it was not the right choice for me in my reading experience with this. I also have to say that I was hoping for a little bit more depth to this story. Like, I expected B to be more focused about her discovering who she really is, which, I guess she does, but it's kind of just shoved into the background. Like, she makes some friends, but we never really see or hear from them ever again. Like, there's one major scene with them, and like, oh, it seems like this is gonna be her new life, but they just fall off the page and out of the book and out of the universe, I guess. I'd even say the stakes of this book feel really small, and that is to be expected given the genre. But I also think that B's motivations were really hard to define. And some of her flaws are not properly set up, and some of her background desperately needed to be explored more. There's a lot of repetition in this, and the story does move at a glacial pace. We'll be hanging out with B as she watches something on her laptop, she gets some pie, she returns home to watch more stuff, drink a beer, flirt with Austin, have a beer, eat the pie he brings over, and then it's repeat the very next day. Like, even the title of Breaking All the Rules seems to kind of fizzle out. And I realized Austin makes sure a lot of the things on her no-no list that she wants to do now only happen because he makes them happen. Way to have agency in your own story, B. I'm going to talk about the spice in this book. I like sex just as much as the next person, but Austin and B are always running at like 100% on the down to clown scale. He says her name and her nipples are activated and ready to go. I got very tired of hearing about B's nipples and what they were doing at any given moment. It was just, it's too much. I'm not even aware of my own that much. Everything in this book is sexualized. Everything. I felt like this book was written for like 13-year-olds, just tee-hee-hee, everything sexy, when these are supposed to be adults in like their late 20s to mid 30s. Like, the way she eats ice cream, which, okay, I'll give you that one, but then it's how she eats pie and crumbs going everywhere. That's not sexy. It's how Austen says her name, how he, Beatrice, how Austen looks at her, how a steering wheel feels in her hand. Like, honest to God, after a while, all I could think of was the Lonely Island song, the Jizz in My Pants, where everything sets the guy off. The alarm clock goes off, and he can't contain his excitement. A breeze rolls in through the window. He just ate a grape. Like, the song was written about these two people. I also have to ask, what does Austen see in Bea? I get that she's supposed to be older, but she's reminded me so much of Jessica from Love is Blind season 1, where she's just constantly telling us that she's 35 and Austen is 25, and how could they ever work out? It's 10 years. Chill out, girl. Though, thanks, Andrews, for implying that because she's 35, she's practically a withered crone with shriveled up reproductive organs. As someone who is about to turn 35, I really loved that message, let me tell ya. But back to Bea and Austen's interest in her. They don't seem to have much in common, and she's kind of weird. Like, she's extremely fortunate that she can afford to quit her job, pay her LA-based rent, and afford this apartment in Colorado for a few months without even worrying about bills. There's also this subplot and third act conflict around work that kind of had me rolling my eyes. But I guess it follows the formula for a romance novel, so I guess you do you book. But it's just, the last minute third act conflict just felt really out of left field, and again, felt like it was shoehorned in to make things happen. I also have to say that Bea doesn't really do a good job of reassuring Austen in their relationship, and he seems to fall in love with her, even though the version of her he meets is kind of gross. Like, she talks about not having showered for practically a week and like re-wearing the same bra and sweatpants. And he seems to be attracted to that version of her and just the overall burnt out version. He doesn't really seem to like her much when she goes back to who she really is day in and day out. I can honestly see why Bea likes him, but not the other way around. She doesn't give him much back in terms of a relationship. In fact, you think he'd be super annoyed with her and how she acted during their first meeting when she's being really flippant and purposely antagonizing him to get arrested, which is another like fun privilege thing. Like, yeah, you can just be arrested and not have to worry about it. But it is really good that Austen is the equivalent of a human golden retriever, because he just doesn't care. He forgets about it. It also really grated on my nerves that Bea refers to herself as this cranky person and super strict, but then everyone thinks the sun shines out of her ass and loves her and thinks she's amazing, and won't she just do them this huge honor of gracing them with her amazing presence because she's so good at everything she does? Just make it make sense. I kind of also had that same criticism of Book Lovers. Like, the main character in that is said to be just this ice queen, but we don't ever really get to see that. Moving on. I love Supernatural. I really do. I have watched the entire 15 seasons multiple times, but Bea's obsession with the Winchesters was even creepy for me. Plus, she makes a comment about something that Dean definitely wouldn't do, even though he totally would, so not such a fan after all, are you, Beatrice? All in, I would rate this 2 out of 5 stars. Excuse me, my microphone just won't stay put today. Yeah, there are readers who will love this, and it's a cute story, but I was bored. I was cringing at some of the dialogue. Again, Bea uses their age difference as a reason not to be together, but she also acts like a young dumbass, so maybe they are evenly matched. She doesn't exactly make the case that she's this mature person who is much too old for a 25-year-old. She read younger than he does. It wasn't the worst thing I've ever read, but it definitely wasn't the best. I'm not sure I would pick up Andrew's work in the future, as her writing style just didn't click with me. Sometimes it's read like a Disney princess who just drank a wine cooler for the first time and is trying to be edgy. Like, Bea loves puns and being all cutesy, but then becomes a dominatrix during the sex scenes. It was just strange characterization. And again, the italics overload just made me want to poke my eyes out. But like I said, if your cup of tea is cute, sweet, romantic, and you don't mind predictable plots, you really may love this. Me, I needed a palate cleanser, which luckily I found in Wendy Walker, her Don't Look For Me. I absolutely loved this. 4 out of 5 stars. But let's see what the book promised before I talk about why I loved it so much. From the best-selling author of All Is Not Forgotten comes a compelling and emotionally powerful story of a daughter's desperate search to find her mother before it's too late. They called it a walkaway. The car abandoned miles from home, the note found at a nearby hotel, the shattered family. It happens all the time. Women disappear, desperate to start over. But what really happened to Molly Clark? The night Molly disappeared began with a storm, running out of gas, and a man offering her a ride to safety. But when the doors lock shut, Molly begins to suspect she has made a terrible mistake. A new lead brings Molly's daughter, Nicole, back to the small, desolate town where her mother was last seen to renew the desperate search. The locals are sympathetic and eager to help. The innkeeper, the bartender, even the police. Until secrets begin to reveal themselves, and Nicole comes closer to the truth about that night and the danger surrounding her. So I've read another Walker book, and I really like her writing and her work, so I was really excited for this. I think her stories are well plotted, paced, and she has very interesting characters. I mean, I tore through this, and I think I finished it in like a day and a half. I was so engrossed in the story. It was a little bit of, what the hell is happening here? Why is this happening? Though I do think that the reveals came right when you needed them to be, and the atmosphere was really tense and kept me turning the pages as I just had to know what was going on. And I think, again, the characters are distinct and they're pretty intriguing. This is a fabulous thriller, and one that actually meets the criteria of a thriller. I loved this. It was the right amount of suspenseful, and clues were dropped that actually make sense at the end. And for the most part, people acted like people, not red herrings. Everything is just a bit sinister, and you don't know who to trust, and it was great. I will say, there were a few things that I didn't like, but they're very minor. The first one that comes to mind is a speech given during the climax that was a bit over the top and a bit info-dumpy. I get that we need the explanation behind certain twists and reveals, but it just didn't feel natural for the character to talk that way. And apparently I just have a real big problem with villains doing the whole monologuing at the end and telling you why they acted the way they did. I really wish there were some other ways to get those reveals out than just the big speech, because even this one had me kind of chuckling at how just overdramatic it was. Honestly, the ending and final reveal is the only thing that kept this from being a true 5-star read for me. There's a twist that just doesn't really fit with everything else that's been set up to that point and just felt at odds with everything we knew. I think the book would have had a stronger climax without a certain reveal, but I still really liked the book and it didn't taint my overall opinion of it. The other thing that started to jump out at me was Molly's repetition of the things that had happened with her daughter Annie. I understand that that would be on her mind and weighing on her, but I get it. I don't need it repeated every chapter. But that is one thing that I think Walker does well in her work. She shows broken people, morally gray people, how our psychology changes and what we're willing to do to survive or protect loved ones can change. We are complex, and so are her characters. Even the 9-year-old girl that Molly meets, is she just a child? Is she a victim? Or is she in on it and scary and dangerous in her own right? Does she want to inflict pain too? Oh, I guess one other thing that kind of stuck out to me was that, again, this little girl that she meets, Alice, is supposed to be 9, yet she's constantly carried around by her caretaker and even Molly. Like, is it just me, or are these characters freakishly strong to be carrying around a 9-year-old? Like, aren't 9-year-olds kind of big and growing? Like, if she was 5, I could see that, but 9? 9? Am I the only one who's thinking that it's weird that they're carrying around a 9-year-old? Let me know in the comments. Anyway, like I said, complete 4 stars. I definitely recommend reading this on a rainy day. I will definitely continue to add Walker's works to my to-be-read pile, as I really enjoyed this and just her overall style that she continues to have in her work. This was a really great cleanser from my first 2 disappointing reads of the month of June. So next up, we have The Last Word by Taylor Adams. And this was my second read by Adams, as I had read No Exit a few months ago. I loved this, truly loved it, until the ending. Like, loved the writing, the characters, and then that ending was just so foobarred. But let's see what The Last Word promised. Emma Carpenter is living in isolation with her golden retriever, Leica. I'm probably saying that wrong. House sitting an old beachfront home on the rainy Washington coast. Her only human contact is with her enigmatic elderly neighbor, Deke, and via text with the house's owner, Jules. One day, she reads a poorly written but gruesome horror novel by the author H.G. Cain and posts a 1-star review that drags her into an online argument with none other than the author himself. Soon after, disturbing incidents start to occur at night. To Emma, this can't just be a coincidence. It was strange enough for this author to bicker with her online about a lousy review. Could he be stalking her too? As Emma digs into Cain's life and work, she learns he has published 16 other novels, all similarly sadistic tales of stalking and murder. But who is he? How did he find her? And what else is he capable of? Displaying his trademark command of rapid-fire pacing, unnerving atmosphere, and razor-sharp characterization, Taylor Adams once again delivers a diabolically disturbing and deadly game of cat and mouse. Again, great idea, great story, interesting characters. Adams is a good writer. I was hooked with the suspense, the atmosphere, the twists, but Christ on a cracker, Adams, land the plane. Like No Exit, this book's ending became so over the top and so long, I almost wondered if it was satire. It was the Oprah meme. You get a twist, everybody gets a twist. I want the book to come to a realistic conclusion. Stop. Please stop stretching the ending beyond what it should be. Stop letting the story spiral into the ridiculous. I also have to say, also like No Exit, the villain's manner of speaking felt really cartoonish and out of place. I also didn't love the notion that the villain was just that way because of mental illness. I mean, he could have just been creepy because he's a creepy dude. We don't have to stigmatize other people's mental illness this way. Just let the dude be weird. It's okay. I also have to say that the way the character talks is very much for our benefit as a reader and not really true to the character or the story. Like, they talk like they know they're in a book. Also, like No Exit, I really loved this until the 90% mark. And then it was just a slog to get through, when the ending should not feel that way. You also have to have a pretty open mind and be willing to suspend all disbelief for these endings. These villains in Adams' work are supernatural with what they're able to withstand. I also felt that the story was a bit predictable. I know I've ranted before about stories that leave no freaking clues and try to pass off the killer without any setup, but this almost had too much setup. Certain details were basically lit up with a neon sign saying, "Remember this!" And the twists, you could kind of see them coming from a mile away. I have read reviews where people did not like the mixed media-ish format, where there are excerpts from a book, so it's like a book within a book. I actually didn't mind that part. I thought it was an interesting add-on to the story as we saw Emma's perspective of what was happening and then the glorified and altered retelling from the villain. I actually thought it was kind of a neat touch. Like I said, loved it for the first 90%. The first 90% of the book is entertaining, suspenseful, and it's a real page-turner. I was staying up hella late to fly through these chapters. Adams does a great job of keeping me hooked and does craft unique and very original horror stories. He knows his genre, and he writes it quite well. You feel like you're trapped in the house with Emma. You feel like someone is standing right behind you. I also think he really knows his characters. His characters are all facing their own inner demons, as well as real-life ones, and you can't help but root for them. Adams is good at putting his characters into life-or-death situations, for the most part. I'm not going to be screaming at the heroines of his books for just making dumb choice after dumb choice. I mean, he's not Riley Sager. Emma was actually pretty resilient and used her head to outsmart the killer. Except for one certain scene. Like, there's a scene where Emma has a glimmer of a chance and just basically slams the door on it. Like, girl, what are you doing? I also have to say, how is all of this stuff happening in the story and her dog isn't stressed out in the slightest? Like, the door opens a little too fast and my dog loses his mind. Like, the dog just kind of disappears from the story during certain moments, but then comes back and plays a major role later. It just felt weird to me. I hate to say it, but I would rate this a 2.5 to 3. I would have given it a 4. I loved it. Until that ending. Just would not end. I'm really hoping that this isn't Adam's signature style, as it really would deter me from his other works. I've really enjoyed his writing, but again, just wrap up the story and don't let these villains basically like be burned to death and just be able to come back and be like, haha, I'm here for one more shootout. Like, not how this works. I also know that plenty of authors tend to follow their own like templates. Like, I know a lot of people give Dan Brown a lot of shit for doing this, even Megan Miranda, whom I love, but their stories don't have 99 fake out endings attached. That is really what I take issue with the 2 books that I've read by Adams. Like I said, land the plane, dude. You do not want readers closing your book and being glad that it is finally over. Most of us don't want the, but wait, there's more. But wait, there's more. Oh, have I already mentioned? There's more. Let me keep the story going. No, just finish it. I also have to say, I did read a review that compared this to No Exit in terms of setup. You have a scrappy but depressed heroine who faces a villain that thinks they're super smart and hates women on some level, and apparently are just beating Jesus at his own game with how often they can resurrect. Same thing, different setting. If you liked No Exit, you might really like this. Though I've also seen reviews from people that liked No Exit and hated this, so I guess I felt similarly about the books. Great for most of it, but I want to be put out of my misery with those endings. You may also like this if you like campy slasher movies. It kind of felt like it was taking a page out of Scream's book, but it just wasn't as good, and it didn't really nail almost that like satire, making fun of the tropes. Like, it almost took itself too seriously to read that way. Now, I am going to give a spoiler that I wish I had gotten before picking up this book, but skip ahead to this time if you want to go into this spoiler free. Okay? We all set? So, the spoiler I wish I had gotten was that the dog lives. Emma is able to save her dog. I was so nervous that her dog was going to be cruelly killed and I would have to throw the book right out the window. But the dog is okay. Alright. Let's move on to A Rip Through Time by Kelley Armstrong. And this is also a book drop pick. They're books for coffee, aka again, their thriller subscription. I was intrigued with the back cover copy, so let's take a look at that now. May 20th, 2019. Homicide detective Mallory Atkinson is in Edinburgh to be with her dying grandmother. While out on a jog one evening, Mallory hears a woman in distress. She's drawn to an alley where she is attacked and loses consciousness. May 20th, 1869. Housemaid Catriona Mitchell has been enjoying a half-day off, only to be discovered that night strangled and left for dead, exactly 150 years before Mallory is strangled in the same spot. When Mallory wakes up in Catriona's body in 1869, she must put aside her shock and adjust quickly to her new reality, life as a housemaid to an undertaker in Victorian Scotland. She soon discovers that her boss, Dr. Gray, also moonlights as a medical examiner and has just taken on an intriguing case, the strangulation of a young man, similar to the attack on herself. Her only hope is that catching the murderer can lead her back to her modern life, before it's too late. In A Rip Through Time, New York Times bestselling author Kelley Armstrong induces a brand new series mixing mystery, romance, and fantasy with thrilling results. So, all in, I liked this. The plot is intriguing, and you do want to solve what's going on, but I will say I didn't feel super connected to Mallory throughout the story. I was surprised at how quickly she seems to accept her situation, and she kind of just buries her emotions around leaving her family behind. Like, I would be in agony not knowing if my grandma had passed or thinking that time is continuing on, and who knows where I'd pop back into my own timeline. Are my parents freaking out? Like, what is happening to people that I care about back in the time I just left? As it's the start to a series, I'm sure some of those things will change, and maybe Mallory will learn more about how this happened and why, but she kind of just seemed to roll with the punches, and I don't know if I'd be able to keep my cool like that. Maybe that says more about me than Mallory, but I would also be worried about messing things up. Like, I am a huge Back to the Future fan. Like, my husband and I practically had a Back to the Future themed wedding, especially like our cake toppers and all of that. That is how seriously we take our Back to the Future. And even Doc knew not to meddle or change the course of history, or it could be disastrous or lead to a paradox. Mallory seems okay with messing things up, but she also pays some lip service to not wanting to mess things up, but she doesn't really care enough to not do anything. It's like, if I acknowledge that it's bad, I can still do it. Okay. I also found it weird how readily some of the other characters accepted the truth about Mallory, or how some of them figured it out in their own particular ways. It just felt off. Like, I know we as the readers need to suspend our disbelief, but the characters shouldn't be. But back to Mallory. She's curious, which makes sense as she's a detective, but she also makes some decisions that are at odds with what we're told about her. I also didn't like that we're in first person point of view, but there are chapter cliffhangers where Mallory simply just will not finish a thought to keep suspense and to keep us from knowing what she's thinking or gonna do. But it felt forced. We're in your head. You can't keep us from your own thoughts. It was a weird choice to me. There was also a point that was so tiny, but it really bugged me. At the beginning of the book, Mallory makes some comment about never not having access to the internet, but she's supposed to be my age. I think she may have been born like a year after me or something. I definitely remember a time before the internet and having to use encyclopedias and other books to do my homework. So I get that, like, yeah, we're so used to it now, but I definitely remember being in elementary school and not having the internet. It also feels like secondary characters simply stop existing when they're not in scenes. Like, she doesn't think a lot about Mrs. Wallace or Alice or this Davina woman who probably has the answer she's looking for, but they only seem to be people when they interact with Mallory. If they're not on screen, they don't exist. I'm also going to say that I got really confused in the second half when Mallory is really going about her detective work, and some of her leaps in logic to solve the mystery were things I could not follow. I didn't understand how she understood the clues in the ways she did, and even trying to follow some of her explanations, I was like, huh? Like, it felt very convoluted, and then the wording of certain things made it really hard to grasp what was going on. I do think that the overall pacing of the book is good, but some elements could have used a bit more work. Like, Mallory realizes Catriona is a real piece of work herself, but seems to easily worm her way into Dr. Gray's life and get closer to him and his sister, and everyone just accepts it. Like, I get we need to move things along, but then give me a time jump, or explain how truly she gets in her good graces that easily. I also think that the villain just kind of fell off the wagon when it came to the reveal speech. It was so over the top and didn't add anything to the explanation of what was going on. I do think the strongest parts of the novel are examining how much has changed in 150 years, and really how much hasn't. Our manner of speaking, dressing, and our idea of society may have changed, but we still have issues that need fixing no matter what time period we find ourselves in. I also like how well researched the book was to capture the time, and I really felt like we were living back in the 1800s with Mallory. The atmosphere was really well written and realistic, and I also did enjoy the humor that was used in this story. I did like the hint of a romance blooming between two characters and would be really curious to see how that plays out. Though if you're going into this expecting like a full-on romance, not going to be for you. All in, I would rate this a solid 3-star read. The concept is unique and it held my interest throughout, but I'm not sure if I will continue the series or not. Maybe I'll pick up the second before I visit Scotland in the fall, just to kind of get in the mood. The time traveling part of this is interesting, but I really wish we had a better grasp of how it worked and what it meant. Again, I'm sure that it's going to be built into the sequels, and I do have to recognize that this is the first book in a series, so there is going to be a bit of slow world building and character development that will take place. All in, I enjoyed my time with this and would give Armstrong's work another try in the future. I did enjoy her writing style. All right, up next we have The Strange Inheritance of Leah Fern by Rita Zoey Chin. I was so excited for this as I love elephants, freaking love them, and figured based on the cover that they were going to play a bigger role. But this was a weird one and kind of a struggle for me. But let's see what the story promised before we dive into the review. Born in a carnival trailer, Leah Fern begins her life as the youngest and very best fortune teller in the world, taking strangers' hands and feeling the depths of their emotions. Her mother, Jeannie Starr, is a captivating magician who, with no explanation, leaves 6-year-old Leah with a friend and disappears. 15 years later, a small-town outcast, Leah is surprised by a knock on her door. A mysterious neighbor has died and left Leah a series of letters that will lead her on an unusual journey, one that will finally reveal the truth about her mother. An enchanting novel about the transcendent powers of the imagination and the courage it takes to love, The Strange Inheritance of Leah Fern explores the unlikely but ultimately redemptive relationship between a young woman who has forgotten how to live and a dead woman who summons her to remember. First up, I have to say, this story is so freaking slow and full of filler scenes, at least in my opinion. And I think that the writing style had a lot to do with that feeling of it being super slow. The prose is very pretty, but it was too much for my taste. Like, I would find myself skimming over sentences, or I'd be reading and then realizing that I'm not really reading it. It was not my style of writing, but it probably does work for many other people. I did read Goodreads reviews where people said that, they really enjoyed the prose, they thought it was beautiful. But for me, it was too much. Like, I'm going to read an excerpt from page 283 so you can decide for yourself if this is the style of writing you like. I do not. But, so on page 283, it reads, "This is for Blue," she said, as blue after blue flickered through her mind. The little prince by the well in his blue suit, the enchanting sky in Rousseau's Sleeping Gypsy, the cobalt swirls of Van Gogh's Nights, the endless motion of Kandinsky's Blue Rider, the iridescent wings of the blue morpho butterfly, the bright feet of the blue-footed booby, the blue trains and the blue sand in Diane Wachowski's Blue Monday, a blue scarf swatching? I guess, yeah, a blue scarf swatching the empty eye socket, the jaw, blue of the vein, of the stone, blue of the rare poppy, blue of the hippo tang, the blue sheen of a first bicycle hitting the ground, the black blue of the blink of time, the sea blue bits of sky between birds, the cellophane blue of the immortal jellyfish, royal blue, lapis, azure, cyan, cerulean, periwinkle, indigo, teal, paint on the fingers, on the brush, on the white, blue beyond a girl's night ceiling, her blue eyes beaming through the endless hall of mirrors on the shelf. What? Like, to me, oh my god, that is how the entire book is written. It's pretty, but it's pretty in small doses. This book really felt like it went against Ron Swanson's advice of do not half-ass two things, whole-ass one thing. This book really felt like two stories that were forced to play nicely together instead of focusing on one core element that would work for the whole story. I really can't say that I liked this. I wanted to. I was so excited. I had saved this on my shelf for a long time, waiting to read it right before my birthday because I was like, oh, this is going to be such a beautiful story about, a woman, elephants, and like her journey and realizing what there is to live for. No, I went into this with real high hopes, and they were just dashed. If I had to rate this, I'd give it at best 2 stars, and that's me being really generous because, again, I can tell this was a labor of love, but this is more like a 1.5 because Chin does have a great vocabulary, she can definitely write, and she can create interesting ideas and characters, but in my opinion, the execution of this was poor. I was hate reading this by the end, and I just wanted it to be over. I truly thought that this was going to be my last read of June, but I had to add another book to the mix to cleanse my mind and reset my mood after this. And that palate cleanser came in the form of The Party Crasher by Sophie Kinsella, because I found the perfect author to help me end June on a high note. Sophie Kinsella. But let's see what The Party Crasher promised. It's been almost 2 years since Effie's beloved parents got divorced, destroying the image of the happy, loving childhood she thought she had. Since then, she's become estranged from her father and embarked on a feud with his hot and much younger girlfriend, Krista. And now, more earth-shattering news. They've sold Green Oaks, the rambling Victorian country house Effie has always called home. When Krista decides to throw a grand house-cooling party, Effie is originally left off the guest list, and then receives a last-minute anti-invitation. Effie declines, but then remembers a beloved childhood treasure still hidden in the house. Her only chance to retrieve it is to break into Green Oaks while everyone is busy celebrating. As Effie sneaks around the house, hiding under tables and peeping through trapdoors, she realizes the secrets Green Oaks holds aren't just in its dusty passageways. Watching how her family behaves when they think no one is looking, Effie begins to see them all in a new light. Then she runs into Joe, the handsome love of her life, who long ago broke her heart, and even more truths emerge. Over the course of one blowout party, Effie realizes that she must confront her past before she'll ever be able to face her future. So I am a huge Sophie Kinsella stan. I have loved many of her quirky heroines like Becky Bloomwood and Lara Langton, and I just love her sense of humor. I'll admit that some of the Shopaholic books really jumped the shark in later installments, though I do think that the latest Christmas one was more in line with the Becky that I love and adore, and that some of Sophie Kinsella's other books just didn't have the same spark as Shopaholic and 20s Girl, but I really loved The Party Crasher. I will say that if you know that you don't like her typical heroines like Becky Bloomwood, who can be somewhat feckless and frivolous, but they're characters that still have hearts of gold, you might not like this, because Effie is a typical Kinsella main character, and I could see her rubbing some readers the wrong way. That said, I really enjoyed being in her story, though there are some things she did that felt a bit forced to make the story happen, but I also don't care. I really liked this. I thought it had the right balance of humor, zany situations and misadventures, and intriguing character development. It's an entertaining story about growing up, moving on, and understanding that things aren't always what they seem. You can't spend time clinging to a rose-tinted past and ignoring what's real and what's happening now. I also really liked Effie's relationship with her sister Bean and her brother Gus, who were both going through their own arcs. They're real characters, and Effie is able to help them and let them help her along the way. I would have rated this 4.5 out of 5 stars. I had a lot of fun with this. I liked the emotional stuff that's running underneath the party plot, and I'm going to continue to be a Kinsella stan. If you like her classic stuff, you will probably like this. If you're looking for a funny, somewhat ridiculous, and easy to read book, I would definitely recommend this. I read it in one day just because I thought it was so cute and I couldn't put it down. All right, so that wraps up what I read in June. If you read any of the same books as me this past month, I would love to hear your thoughts. Or if you have any recommendations of what I need to read in July or August, please also share those ideas in the comments below. Otherwise, thanks for joining me, and I'll see you next month in the reading room.